Welcome back. I'm Forbes adventurer Jim Clash. Late spring is the peak climbing season on 29,035-foot Everest, the world's highest mountain. It is also the most deadly. Recently, high on the mountain, we saw a heroic save of one injured climber, but also callous abandonment of another. Life and death on the mountain. Joining us now to discuss these issues is Everest veteran Robert Anderson. You're a real Everest veteran. You've been on the mountain 9 times. You've summited once. This kind of behavior where 40 climbers pass somebody on their way to the summit and don't help him, is this normal on a mountain like Everest?
On Everest, it's a little bit different. I think it's hard sometimes to pass judgment on people from down here because you're in such desperate straits yourself that with that many people, if anything, it almost gets worse. If one person found another person in dire straits on a mountain, you'd obviously help them, I think. But when you get a whole bunch of people passing by, it's almost easier. But certainly there were, I think, some challenges and some difficulties they faced, and there's a lot of questions that will certainly be asked when they come back down again.
Have you ever been on an expedition like that where an injured climber was left for dead on Everest?
I had an incident. I was guiding a trip in 2003, and we had some real challenges with one of our members up just below the summit, literally 100 feet below the top, and he'd had to turn around because he couldn't see very well. And myself and the guide that I was working with, we literally pretty much put his feet in holes all the way down the mountain and guided him back down the mountain again to get him back to the South Col.
And did you abandon your own summit attempt to do that?
Fortunately, I'd already been to the summit, so I didn't have some of those questions that that people have when they're on the way up.
And then, of course, we've got the other climber, the Australian Hall, who was abandoned by his Sherpas, and then Dan Mazer, an American guide, found him still alive and then helped rescue him and bring him down the mountain. So it seems like this season on Everest we've had a tale of both callousness by climbers and then also heroic action. What do you make of that?
Well, I think in different circumstances, I think sometimes people shine and sometimes they don't, but certainly the incidents of Lincoln spending the night up there on his own and then being rescued the next morning and brought down, it's a sign of real heroics. And Dan was on his way up and he abandoned that summit attempt along with his Sherpas and helped Lincoln get back down the mountain. It's
got to be hard. I mean, give us, from your perspective, you've been on Everest all these times. It's 2 months on the mountain before you actually get to summit. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of money. It must be hard to abandon your summit attempt if you see somebody in danger. I mean, if you're close to the top, it's a life dream. I mean, there must be a lot going on in your mind.
Yeah, there's an the desire to summit is obviously, if you're up really high, it increases as you go. You put a couple of months into it, and you probably put a couple of years into training, and it might be one chance in your life that you get to the top of the mountain. So the ability to discount helping somebody else, if you have any reasons or excuses, I suppose some people would probably logically do that.
Tell us what it's like up there at above 26,000 feet in the death zone on Everest. What is it like to survive, to be climbing up there? I think most people wouldn't understand.
What I do when I'm guiding groups up high on the 8,000 meter peaks, over 26,000 feet, is really start at the beginning and say, you need to be thinking about 4 things. So it's really the weather and what's coming down, hopefully not falling out of the sky in your head all the time, but the winds. Mm-hmm. And then you've also got the terrain that you're on. The better a climber you are and the more comfortable you are at climbing rock and ice, the better off you're going to be. Then the team around you and then yourself. I think the challenge on Everest is that if any one of those, the margin for error is so small that if you make just a small mistake, everything goes wrong very quickly.
But just describe to our viewers what it's like above 26,000 feet. And what's it like?
Usually you go for the top and it's dark, so your world is very, very condensed. All you can see is in your headlamp. Mm-hmm. You're on oxygen, so you have a mask that's hanging down, so you can't see your feet very well. And you're breathing, and if people have scuba dived, it sounds much the same, so you're very isolated. Mm-hmm. You have on multiple layers of clothing, including mittens, so it's very difficult to do anything. And as you climb up over the rock, there's ropes usually that you have to either try to hang on to or clasp your Jumars to. So there's a lot of things that you have to do at the same time. And you probably haven't slept very well in probably 3 days. You haven't eaten very much. And you can really barely move up there due to the altitude. So it's kind of surprising that some people are alive at all at that altitude.
What is the weather like up there?
Well, good weather would probably be maybe 50-mile-an-hour wind and
good
say
weather.
10 degrees.
Okay.
So with the wind chill factor, that'd be far below 0. And then the bad weather obviously goes down to 30, 40 below, and the winds are such that you can't climb at all.
Now you're a professional ad executive. You work for Motive Media as a creative director, and you're also a professional mountain guide. You've guided people up Everest. How do you balance the two in your life? I think a lot of our viewers would like to know that.
It's always a challenge, but certainly with the clients I've worked with, we try to condense our trips down so they run at times when they're over vacations or holidays, so we can kind of tie that into it. You do all the training in advance, and then you zip out and zip back as fast as you can. And certainly in the Himalayas, it's more difficult because you have to acclimatize, but like when we did our expedition to Greenland, you can fly out to very remote areas and really do a complete trip in a couple of weeks if you're lucky.
Okay, now I'm just going to ask you one final question. If you were climbing Everest and you had a group of people and you saw a person who was ill and possibly dying, a climber, would you stop and save him, or would you keep going?
It's easy to say down here, but I'd stop and save him. Again,
Robert Anderson. I'm Jim Clash. To read more of my adventurer columns, pick up a copy of Forbes magazine or log on to Forbes.com/adventurer. And thank you for watching the Forbes.com Video Network.